All right, today is February 21st, 2021, and we're continuing our discussion on the Desiderata Extinctionati. And in today's agenda, looks like we're cutting it up into a few pieces. What are conspiracy theories really? We're going to go into Jung and archetypes and shadow, and any review of the practical exercises. So I'll start off. I'll say I tried the novelty exercise last week, and just right off the bat, I noticed that just after doing things that are out of my normal routine, I just I wouldn't say flooded, but I had ideas. Uh, I was suddenly I got ideas that I never really had before. Ideas that um, like I guess one example was I was always afraid, or I didn't really like contacting anarchist groups in along my area, and I just thought, you know what, why not? Why not just shoot? We're in COVID time, so I know they're not meeting, but just shoot them an email. And then I also contacted a mutual aid group just to see, hey, what are you guys doing right now in the community? And yeah, so that's just something that that caught my attention, and it's a good exercise, definitely.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. It's basically you just expand your horizons a little bit. That's really nice.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, let us know how that goes. That'll be.
Oh yeah. So far, they haven't really. They just mentioned they're not really doing much at the moment, but they're it looks like what they're doing is mostly like group discussions also, and they do book review or book yeah, they do a lot of discussions at the moment. And I'll see how the mutual aid group goes, because I know there's a lot of uh, like people looking having trouble during this time of COVID, looking for food or shelter. So yeah, definitely I'll keep up with them.
Yep, it's going to be a lot more of that, I think. So it's kind of good for the future. It's put out networks and stuff like that. Is put out feelers to networks is a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Did anybody else try it? Did they?
Well, I didn't actually try it. It kind of happened. It was just a small thing, but it was I was just washing my hands and, drifting along on autopilot perfectly, and then I turned around to use the towel, and I was noticed that like really getting into the feeling of the towel on my hands. It was just suddenly like, wow, that this is just so cool. it was like it was just in that moment, for some reason something had completely stopped, switched off autopilot, and this was whatever was happening was really happening. And yeah, it was it's quite interesting. um and it kind of made me think that the moment of novelty, um it comes back to this question of, it's going to come back to the conspiracy theory discussion. I could see everything was looping around. Was that, in a certain sense, for a situation to be novel, you can't do it. You can't sort of premeditate it. You could set it up like Michael's just talking about, but then it's going to do something that you don't expect. Because if you expect what's going to happen, it's no longer new for you. You've sort of basically cheated. You've thought it out. Uh, but I was thinking about it in relation to the conspiracy theory discussion, because if you that seems to me to be based around this idea of everything must have a doer. Everything that you see coming up must have somebody behind it that's planning it. And the little incident that I had was just sort of made you realize that things aren't they're not premeditated. We think everything's got to have a cause and come up as a result of some I don't know. I'm sorry, I got it a bit lost. But just the fact of what arises just happening out of as a result of everything, rather than being a premeditated thing. I don't know if you want to say something about that.
I did it too, the novelty exercise, and I just very briefly, I realized how much I had absolutely no routine in my life, because I was doing things, and whenever I don't know, it just one day is always different, and now it's different to another. I don't have a set. I was kind of trying to say, where am I going to introduce a novelty? And then it helped me to what Gary was saying, to experience things in the present much more. Even though I didn't introduce, I didn't give you a thing, but it was a door to the now. Even though it was maybe not intended, I don't know what was the intention behind the exercise, but that's what it did for me.
Yeah, it is really intended to be a door to the now, but it made me think what you said about what you wrote on Reddit. The aim of the exercise is really to get people out of being mechanics, just doing things automatically like a machine. So it didn't really occur to me that, about somebody like you in your situation where you're not set in a routine. Most of this is for breaking people out of slavery, because I've said so many times that slavery is all based on the clock and repetition and getting into a routine, and that's part of your incarceration. So part of your liberation is to break out of that routine. But if you already don't have much of a routine, then it's not applicable. The first exercise is applicable where you just come to your senses. So it's another route to your senses. But yeah, if you don't have something to break out of, then it's it's just a question of attending to your senses, and just knowing that being aware of what you are doing at the time. So it's just self-observation is really what it's all about. But the other part of it was the bit that Gary got, that it's remembering to do it. So just the mere fact that you remember to do it is really the thing that's the most important, because what you are doing, the more you practice this, is coming closer and closer to a continuous present, so that eventually, these come as little islands, just little islands of light. They are very nice to basically just feel that you're alive and feel that you're contacted, with the rest of the world and nature and things like a towel, and just be connected to the physical universe is a very nice grounding experience. But it just comes in little flashes, and what happens is the more you practice it, you'll get more in extended periods of it. Eventually, it gets to be something which they call like every minute Zen. And that's often the aim of Zen, is to have just continual waking period where you lucid the whole time and aware that you're being aware, very Buddha-like state. Yeah, people call that satori and things like that.
Hugh, can I come in there for a moment? Which is the question of awakening and this sort of insistence, which I think you have, that you that it's not a gradual process, that your awakening is not a gradual process. But then just thinking about what you're saying, and I was thinking the same thing about these little islands of waking up, which might gradually become more frequent and longer, and then that eventually they all join together into a continent, and bingo, it's there all the time. So, I mean, there's a tendency to look at that as gradual awakening, or as, I mean, I don't know, if it's probably even a waste of time trying to think like
No,
that.
think of it like when you're asleep and you're just about to wake up and you have these kind of lucid periods where you're vaguely aware that, you know, the sun's up, and then your eyes go back to sleep, and then you kind of carry on in that state. If you've ever been in that state where you in bed, you don't have the alarm clock on, it's a Sunday morning, and you're wondering whether you should get up, and you doze back to sleep, and so you're in that kind of phase. But eventually there comes a point where you actually wake up, and then you don't go back to sleep again. You kind of get out of bed, and that's the difference of the continuous period. Is suddenly you wake up. So it's not like you stitch together a quilt of waking moments and then eventually you got the complete quilt. It's basically each one of those periods will start to have other effects that I won't mention, otherwise I might fall stall. But with the other practices combined, just especially reflection and, you know, cogitation on stuff like who is the observer in 1880 and all those kind of things, is they all come together in a head with a kind of an explosion. So they're more like little earth tremors that are just precipitate an earthquake, rather than saying, you know, oh, well, you'll eventually get to, all the little tremors will build up into a huge earthquake that carries on all the time. Is not quite the right analogy. It's that basically they kind of more like birth pangs, and then you eventually get born. So
Oh,
go ahead. I was just going to say the hard part for me, like you said, is remembering, because I see the value in the exercise of just interrupting the routine to be in the present. And I did it one time when I got off the bus. It was dark. I was going home. It's a winter night, but there's a barn that's silhouetted at the bus stop, and I just stopped to look at it. And then, you know, but the hard part is remembering to do it. But I see the value of, you know, it depends on our action too. I mean, one time you said everything, there are no accidents, there are no coincidences. That's what I gathered, something about teleology. But the fact is that we need to do something to interrupt, so that to interrupt ourselves, so that we can see what's going on, really. Because otherwise, if we're not going to do it, I don't think I can rely on the mercy of someone to interrupt it for me.
You need effort, right? You need to put in effort, but it's not really true that you have agency and you're putting in the effort. What's really happening behind the scenes is your alien cortex thinks that it's doing it. So it takes all the credit and says, like, I remembered, and like, I gave you that little experience with, like Gary had with the towel. It's not actually true. It's when it shuts the fuck up, then you get that experience. So you have to go with it and say, like, well, good on me, I remembered to do it, but it's horse fodder. It's basically, it's you remembering to make your alien cortex forget and waking up the rest of your brain. So why the rest of your brain wakes up is just grace. It's just chance. But there, it's ineffable and it's undescribable. But it's like, you might as well ask, why do you wake up in the morning? Don't know. You just do. Yeah, well, did I wake myself up? Was it because of my efforts? Did, if I put enough effort in, it's like, who knows? No one really knows. It's like you might as well ask, when I was born, was that my effort? Did I have to really kick and shove in my mother's womb until I was born? Like,
well, yeah. No,
who knows? I don't know. Do you have an answer for that?
no, I was just being silly. I said, yeah, I kicked around until I was born.
Yeah, it's the strange thing that's it's in Gazzaniga and Sperry's split brain experiments. I mentioned before how they actually showed how your alien cortex is confabulating all the time a story that keeps it in charge of everything. So the remarkable thing that they did was they would give a message to one side of the split brain, like, to one eye. So in other words, they give it to your right eye, which is in other words your left brain, or your left eye, which is your right brain. And they'd say to the left eye, your right brain is vaguely lingual. It can actually read a bit. So they can give a written message, or they might perhaps give a message in your ear. The opposite ear is also crossed over. But anyway, they can give a message to one part of your brain, and then they would say something like, go and switch off the lights. And then your right brain's agreeable, because it's mainly mammalian brain. It'll go and switch off the lights. Then immediately they say to the person, like, why did you switch off the lights? Then the left brain answers, and it says, oh, I thought it was getting a bit bright in here. I just thought it would be better. It always makes up a story. It never says, I don't know. It always puts itself in charge and pretends that it made the decision. And that's an amazing thing, because we cannot believe that everything isn't happening because of our agency. But almost nothing's happening because of your agency. There's also another very disturbing video. I don't know if I could find it, but this is very disturbing, especially in our culture, which is individualistic and very, it's very egotistical and everything. Everybody thinks they have agency and they determine, they can determine their fate. We have this as part of our culture. So then, why this video is disturbing is it's because it's of a video of somebody in hospital that's lost their short-term memory. Now, what happens is they have the same conversation over about a minute or 30 seconds to a minute. And they've just come out of a coma, so they're talking to their daughter. And their daughter says to them, they go, how did I get here? And they said, oh, Mom, you were in a coma. They said, oh, no, why was that? And they go and they say, oh, look at your hair. and then they go over all these sequence of events that sounds like a normal conversation till they get to about 30 seconds in, and they repeat it identically. So then they go back and they say, oh, how did I get here? And the daughter then replies, and the same thing. Like, oh, look at your hair. It's like, and when you see that, it's very disturbing, because it looks so spontaneous. It looks like they directed, and then you realize all of these things are already on a pre-programmed loop. So this you can get a glimpse there of how we just going through these motions. We basically pre-programmed, and we're making up the story that we're directing our action. But really, it's way below the alien cortex that all of this stuff happens. So yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
You're reminding me of my mother. Her short-term memory loss is not anywhere as bad as that, but on a longer scale, it's around about the same. You know, if I ring her up every day, I can absolutely, with perfect safety, have the identical conversation every day, and it's just perfectly new and fresh, and you know, you just carry on. Very much a similar thing. What I wanted to do is a lot of what. Oh yes, what I want to do. If I can just say something, go back a bit about waking up in the morning, and my observation of it sometimes is that you, in the process of going from sleep to full wakefulness, you pass through various stages of consciousness. And one thing that I've noticed is that I seem to pass through a non-personal stage of consciousness, which I've often wondered is a period of actual awakening. And the reason for that is where I live is noisy. And if I'm fully awake, I just find the noise irritating, you know, and I'm aware of it, and I think, fuck these people and their bloody noise and all the rest of it. But for a little while during that waking up period, I'm perfectly aware of all this noise going on, and dogs barking and machinery going and cars, but there's no judgment of it at all. There's no resistance. All of the things that my normal consciousness throws up against that and resists it, it's just not there. It's just like it's all going on, and it's neither fine nor not fine. It's just how it is, and I had sort of pondered whether that was a glimpse into the mind of somebody who was kind of awakened the whole time, you know.
Yeah, that's it. It's a kind of divinity. So what really signifies it is intent and will. So if our alien cortexes have this general overlay of desire and aversion, intent, all of this kind of thing. So it also comes out as a kind of a dialogue. So we're criticizing things that happen, that basically throughout the day something will annoy us. We want things to be other than they actually are. So when you really are observing and in the present, your desires are completely synchronous with what happens anyway. So people think, well, hey, when you're enlightened, then does everything just, all your wishes come true? There's a lot of stuff in the Shruti and Smriti and the Vedic writings and stuff, kind of how wish fulfillment comes true. They talk about the wish fulfilling tree. It's kind of like, hey, you're King Midas. There's a catch to it. And most people think, oh, that's fantastic. You mean I can just think about gold plates and getting rich, or getting any partner that I want. I can get sex from anybody I want. All my desires will be fulfilled. And the answer is yes. The catch is that you're speaking out of ignorance. If you actually are in that moment, the only thing you desire is what happens anyway. So all these overlays of desires and things like that are kind of outside where you are in the moment. This kind of alien cortex time machine where it projects forward and it says, I want this to happen. I want the birds to shut up. I want the world to be perfect. I want communism to work. We're trying to make the world conform to our heads, but it's far easier to make your head conform to the world. We've gone mad. We've gone absolutely mad because we want, the mountain to move to Muhammad. We want the whole world to conform with what's in our little heads. So people go and join XR and they do, geoengineering, and there's this continual thing where we've wrecked the planet with cars and engineering and the Industrial Revolution. And what we're trying to do is to make nature conform to what's in our heads. But what we should be teaching kids to do in school is to teach them it's much easier to make your head conform to the world. It's way easier. And that's kind of the definition of sanity. So when you get more into the present, you'll find that you are fulfilled. Everything is fulfilled. You have, if you think of something to do now, what people do, they have these kind of strange motivations. They think, oh, I must clean this. I must do that. I should do that. All these kind of things, and then they like, I must force myself to go to the gym or something like that. A very strange, artificial way of going about things. No other primate sits down and thinks, I must cross that river, or I must, swing on branches more often. I must do at least 20 pull-ups on the. No other ape does that. If they did, they would be dysfunctional, and we are. Basically, we go to the gym and stuff, and we think, well, I'm a Superman now because I'm getting fit, I'm getting my life together. It's not. You're getting more and more dysfunctional. You can see people, they go to the gym, they're completely muscle bound, they're freaks. And they think like, oh yeah, but I feel good. It's like, no, you're a fucking freak, man. But they don't see it because they have all these extraneous kind of perverse desires and aversion. And the primary desire is that they don't want to die. But you should just say like, look, it's just easier to die. Just like, you don't have to go to the gym. Being like, the biggest hunk on the block doesn't give you eternal life. Just, you can save yourself a lot of money at Gold's Gym by just saying, fuck it, I'm going to die. You see, that's the primary thing that we're trying to avoid. We can see forward to our death, and then we have all these extraneous things that basically they're annoyances, they're irritations, all these kind of things go to make this kind of hair shirt that we kind of live in. But if you get more and more into the present, you're fulfilled in the present, because if there's something to be done, like, housework or something like that, you don't have to force yourself to do it. The energy to do it is right there as soon as you notice it. It only disappears if you don't act on it then for some other reason. Like you say, oh, that's really dirty. I must clean that. Anyway, I'll do it after I just check my email. You're fucking dysfunctional. You basically, because when you've checked your email, then you have to, as an effort of will, drum up energy out of nowhere to actually do the cleaning. But the energy was right there as soon as you saw it. It's just you brought in this extraneous layers of desires and aversions. But if you act spontaneously, like they say, like a Buddha nature, like a dog, a dog never does that. No other animal does what we do. If a dog sees a ball, it runs after it. It's effortless. Why? Because it has the adrenaline. Everything is there. As soon as it sees it in its mind, it does it. But what we do is we have this overlay, and we have all these second-order functions where we just think, well, if I run after that ball, people might think I look stupid. All this desires and aversions and these masks. We heard something about Jung and his his archetypes, and then one of them is the persona. So we have all these personas and things like that are all interfering. They're all these kind of obstacles between us and just the complete natural and spontaneous interaction with the world. So there's somewhere between habit, which is just a ritual, unthinking detachment from the world, which is not it. And there's something where, you're basically being directed, you're trying to force the world into this kind of mode that you wanted to operate in just by an effort of will. And then there's this third way, which is you don't desire anything other than is in front of you, because it's giving you enough of a buzz to kind of getting high on life. So you don't need all the rest.
I find what you say refers a lot to all our natural impulses. For example, you say, well, at an animal level of our brain, the need, the feel that you have to clean comes naturally at some time, like a cat who comes in after eating and he starts to lick himself. Well, you feel the moment when your senses, your smell, your touch tell you it's dirty, and I do it. That's when the energy comes out, because it's messages that are somatic, that are deeply somatic, that come and say you. It's like food. It's like eating. I for years would say, what the F are you doing? eating at regular times. I mean, they all say, people have got weight problems because they eat between meals, but it's not true. It's not that. It's because this structure of meals fits the working hours and society, but people are not all hungry at the same time. Look at a baby when he's born, like breastfeed a baby, you know. We all have, and then why do we have to have this structure of time to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner? You know, and it's, you know, you're hungry, you eat. Like, I don't know, it's just like, but it's again what you say is this control, this kind of complete cut off from your instincts, from your natural being.
Yeah, the thing is, we because we don't do things like tasting, we eat when we're not hungry, and we eat because of, say, advertising. If you see a McDonald's, then you go, oh, I want a McDonald's. You don't really want a McDonald's. If you actually taste a McDonald's, it tastes like shit. I mean, it really tastes like shit. But nobody knows that because they just reacting. Basically, leptin is telling them, oh, you know, this is a high calorie thing over there, and so you're getting, your reptilian brain is telling you, you know, oh, it fits in with the advertising, and then they trigger you to do this, what they call in ethology a fixed action potential. So basically, it's just a trigger and a habit. But if you break through that, if you're actually attending, because you triggered and you think, I want a McDonald's, you go and you eat it. If you don't go, oh, so good, you say, it's not really, you're not really tasting it. You're going, as a fixed action potential. Basically, you're just going through a fixed behavior that you've taught yourself, and McDonald's has taught you to do. If you actually smell it and taste it, you go, my fucking God, this is piece of shit. But nobody does that because they're not attending when they actually bite into that burger. And then they don't stop. They finish the burger. You see, everybody will finish the burger because that's what they put in a Happy Meal or whatever the blasted thing is they give you. So you finish it whether you're hungry or not. You see, like a chimp wouldn't do that. The chimp will leave an apple half finished and stuff. But your mom tells you, well, don't leave that on the plate. So we've divided our life up into these slices of meal times, what's on a plate, and then you get this huge wastage. You know, like right now, Xi Jinping is having this huge campaign of non-food wastage, which is called the empty plate thing. And he's like, we're not supposed to have food on our plate. We're not supposed to sit down. And what they say is, you know, to preserve food, however many people are at a restaurant in China, you just order one less plate than the number of people. It's like, this is not the way we should be eating. This is just completely unnatural. And then, you know, you get all these, you know, supply chain problems and timing problems. And it's because we're chopping up everything we're chopping up the quantities into servings on a plate, which is fucking daft. You know, you might not want to eat like that. So the fact that we're trying to force our primates sensibilities and behaviors into this very unnatural chronological time slice. So you know, a certain time of day we eat for a certain amount of time, we eat a certain proportion. All of that is completely at odds with our physiology, which is based on kairos. So we should be able to just go and eat when we want, what we want, and basically it would be local, or it would be in season, it would be something what a chimp could get off a local tree in its local environment. And if you did that, you wouldn't get fat. You would be in peak health. Yeah.
But you I would add, if you don't mind, also the experience of the hunger. You see, if you talk to people,
wait, you got your mic went. Say that again. Your mic went.
If you ask people what do you feel when you're hungry, what are the sensations in your mouth, in your stomach, in your head, in your hands that you feel when you're hungry, and it's extremely difficult for people to describe what is hunger? Is it a feeling, a pitted feeling in the stomach? Is it saliva in the mouth? And it is absolutely, if you ask people, how do you know you're hungry? And they just like, I mean, if you look at an animal or a pet or even a young child, you know, you go, ugh, you know, it's just, they know, and actually they put their hands to their belly when they're hungry. Babies who don't talk, you know, they put their hand in the mouth. But humans now don't know what it feels like to be hungry, except, of course, in extreme situations of hunger, and then people experience it in a really terrible way.
Yeah, I mean, we screwed up to oblivion. I mean, it's like water and stuff. They say, you know, they say, oh, you must have 8 liters of water. It's pure hooey. That 8 liters of water thing has become an icon, and it went back to about 2001 when Coke brought out Dasani. When they brought out bottled water, they did all this fake research, and they just flooded all the media with all this crap saying, oh, people are not hydrated enough. It's like, who the fuck ever used the word hydrated before 2001? You can look in Google search. There's no such word. But in the context of a human being is hydrated. Then they said, well, oh, you must be hydrated like a pot plant. You know?
Exactly.
They did it entirely because as a launch for their fucking bottled water. And now it's still around. You still see people, the importance of hydration. Look, there's an amazing mechanism that basically tells you exactly how much water you need. It's an incredible invention. Nobody's ever heard of it. You never see it in the press, but it's a very secret mechanism. It's called thirst. Major medical breakthrough. They haven't discovered it yet. This is just secret, just for us on this video, okay?
But it's like the food pyramid that they tried to push on nurses, dietitian, doctors in the 90s. And it was to support the cereal industry, because the base of the pyramid was all those carbs, to know all those cereals, bread, and all that was at the beginning of the what they call obesity epidemic. But it was just, and there's still people, I mean, even though I tried to tear them all up in the surgeries where I worked, they were still coming back. They were sent by food companies, pharmaceuticals, and there's still people who are handed that out in hospitals, and they've got this ridiculous, like, it's just, you know, you can't do anything. You've got a big machine in front of you who's completely brainwashing people to believe in a food pyramid, and they teach it in school. There's nothing you can do.
That was actually created by a guy, I can't remember his name, but he might have died just recently. He might still be alive, but what that was the idea of you know, Roosevelt's idea of a chicken in every pot. So they were basically trying to feed the whole of America with you know, basically this growing population to 320 million. So what they realized, the only way to feed this amount of people efficiently, the only way you can have a growing population without having a Malthusian catastrophe, is making them eat grains. And so they did the corn subsidy. This was the guy that did the corn subsidy. The corn subsidy, it was a disaster for American health. It's basically caused a pandemic of diabetes. It did kind of it did actually feed America, but it fed America on starch. It's basically, if you put starch in your mouth, it turns to sugar almost immediately. So you're putting your body effectively into toxic shock. You actually, talking about a McDonald's now that we're on it, and nutrition, you can actually taste it in your mouth. If you next time you have a burger or something like that, especially from McDonald's, which is just high fructose corn syrup, basically just food substitutes. You can actually taste in your mouth that you can taste the sugar, and you can taste what it's doing. And if you actually attend very closely and taste your food and just attend to your body while you eat it, you can tell that it's not doing you a lot of good. That we're chimps. If you look what a chimp and a gorilla eat, they're basically in a big salad bowl eating fruits and berries and very wide diversity of things. but nothing like starch. Starch was a bad accident, and from what I can tell, the starch was. It's not like the story that they tell kids in school. What came first was beer, and it was used as an entheogen. What they're using it is in religious practices to get altered states of mind. So they use what they were doing was they're getting ergot, basically LSD and stuff, is from rye and ergot and stuff. So at places like Göbekli Tepe, there's evidence that they're using beer. But they're not using beer like, it's not the same kind of beer as you go and chug down at the local, right? It's an infusion of a lot of things. But clearly what they're doing is they're using it as an entheogen and to get these religious states of mind. And that comes first. They domesticated wheat to serve the church. It's not like communion wine, but it's not like, oh, we had grapes and wine, and then that turned into the Eucharist and the communion wine. It's not like that at all. The communion wine came first. They were looking for drugs and stuff to make altered states of mind, and then we got wine, and we started cultivating wine and other fruits and stuff to serve that religious purpose. So it's exactly the other way around. But the evidence is all there. If you look at the Dionysian rites, the Eleusinian mysteries and stuff, what they're doing is they're using hallucinogens, and wine is one of them. Beer was one of them. But they made a kind of witch's brew with all these mandrake and deadly nightshade and stuff. They're making a potion that sends you off your rocker for religious purposes. And that's where we got the grain from, to serve those religious things. Then we started domesticating wheats and stuff around Göbekli Tepe and those areas. And eventually, just like gurus enslave people in cults, cities enslaved large numbers of slaves, made people slaves to the religious ceremonies. So religion comes first, and people are indoctrinated into cults that then become basically labor camps. If you doubt what I have, go back to Germany and see what happened in the 1930s. You start with this idea, this religious cult, and then basically everything is to serve that cult. Everything then becomes, that leads, and then everybody is drawn in, and then eventually you get into the labor camps, and then they recapitulate exactly what happened to us with civilization. Civilization is fucking evil. But you can't convince people of that these days, because one of the reasons is that they're not attending. They're in this kind of trance, and the media and advertising and stuff needs it to be that way. If everybody lived like a chimp and ate fruit and salad, America couldn't feed itself. And Britain, Britain, how many people could live in Britain? 5,000, not even 1,000, I wouldn't say.
So the food pyramid, hydration, all this crap, that's conspiracy theory. So
But I mean,
it is because and people believe in it.
But go back to Egypt, and you see loads of slaves, and what are they feeding them on? Beer and wheat. That's how they kept them going on the pyramids. And that was their food pyramid. And you say, well, why didn't they feed them healthy shit? Because they were chronically undernourished. All the guys that built the pyramids are chronically undernourished. They're short stature, short lives. It's a nutritional disaster. And say, well, it's cheap food. Your starch is cheap food. Basically, that's what if you go to South Africa, see the evolution of South Africa. But it started with maize. The reason was maize is very cheap food for a slave. It's cheap, sugary food for a slave. It's cheap energy. It's the cheapest form of energy you can get on a store, and that's why we have it. But I think we mentioned this before, but it is worth going over, especially in the context of tasting your food, and in the context of not being hypnotized by advertising. So if you walk down the street, look at a Coke ad, or look at the outside of a McDonald's. They've got red, the red and the yellow They were market tested to trigger your reptilian brain. They have lots of people inside. It's all kind of crowded, and it's like a feeding frenzy. That feeds right into your reptilian brain. It's like your reptilian brain says, oh, there's a feeding frenzy going on the African plain. I must get involved in that. And yeah, they basically, they've got us completely hooked that way. But anyway, yeah.
Just briefly, Hugh. I can't remember the details, but quite a few years ago, I listened to a fellow giving a series of lectures, and he was talking about how in times gone past, looking at ancient accounts of heroes and great deeds of physical endurance and all the rest of it, that in the texts he was finding the use of the word pulse, P-U-L-S-E, and he was working on this theory that a lot of their physical capacity, which people don't seem to have now, was related to the fact that their diet was significantly better. And he was sort of going into the research of, well, what was it that these people were actually eating? Whereas these days pulse means more or less grains. They're apparently, perhaps the biblical intention was that they were eating a more natural diet than what people are now. I just mentioning that in case it means anything to you. I can't quite recall much detail.
Sure. I'm not sure of pulse, but what they were eating was a lot more diversity. So they ate a wide diversity of things. Our diets are very narrow now. You think, oh, well, come on, there's loads of shit in the supermarket. They're not really. If you look nutritionally, they all kind of come from, like you're saying, like from the food pyramid. But, they in times past, they ate genuinely weird shit, from completely, from shrews to robins and crickets and snails and stuff, which in France they still have quite a broad palate, but in America if you look at the ingredients, they're extraordinarily thin, and the species as well. They estimate that just joining the EU, just formulating the EU, I think there was something like 3,000 grains went extinct, 3,000 types of grains. And the reason is the EU just classified, the marketable types of grains into like 300 varieties or something. So we lost thousands of varieties just by shoehorning everything into a short list of, known types. And so if you look at the known types of foodstuffs in Vons or Ralph's or whatever in America, it's coming from a very, very narrow variety of food sources, and that's part of the problem. Part of the problem is if people would be healthy if they just got a whole load of junk. You'd be better off, eating out of a garbage tip and just getting a complete cross section of stuff. Your body would get what it needed out of it.
There are people across Europe, and particularly I know a group here called Seed Savers, and these people started at the time when there was the threat to have a lot of our ancient vegetables and seeds disappear, to keep them and propagate them and cultivate them so that they're open pollinated and can be saved. And there's Germany, France, I don't know about England, but I know Italy, Portugal, and Ireland. Got a lot of those ancient things that are sometimes grow in the wild, that were perennials, but sometimes cultivated from the Middle Ages and before, still available. And actually, if you look at their gardens, you see that there's an enormous variety of, even in cabbages or leeks or anything, you've got 15 sorts of different things there's nothing to do with the supermarket vegetable that you choose. So among a species, you have diversity already, not only you know, so it is a, though it's not completely bleak in terms of, some people have kept a lot of those seeds, but yeah.
Well, the other thing is seasonality. So certainly in the northern latitudes and temperate climates, seasonality of foods is important. We don't have seasonality anymore. You can like get strawberries in the middle of winter and it's flown from around the world. That's not good for you. That's there's certain times of the year where you need things. We have evolved to have, we haven't evolved entirely in the tropics. We have evolved some kind of seasonality. So you need to have things and that change over at least the period of a season. But now you get the same menu year in, year out. That's not good for you.
I'm just thinking, you just reminded me of something that, with the migration of humans into Europe and eventually to very northern, like the Scandinavian countries and that, where, most of their diet must have been meat because the quality of the natural vegetation was probably not enough to sustain humans. And I'm just sort of wondering whether, then later on in human history, going back and starting to feed those people, those blonde-haired, blue-eyed people who are adapted to eating meat for most of their diet, and then they're coming back and starting to eat grains and getting health problems and that kind of thing. That there's probably a consideration there as well in terms of the adaptation that their bodies have made over a period of time.
Yeah, this is something that gets Torsten upset, is like people talk about vegetarianism and stuff, and he's up in northern Greenland. He's like, you can't be vegetarian up there. Basically, it's meat or nothing. So vegetarians don't like that. This bullshit that we can just eat. If we all turn vegetarian, then we save the planet. It's like, oh, that's bullshit. But I think the Neanderthals and white people really are half Neanderthal. I think that the Neanderthals were serious meat eaters. They ate a lot of things like snails and stuff like that, but there's also enough evidence that they were cannibals too. That's the most healthy and easily digested food you can eat is something from your fellow human being. So I think that might have been the reason why we wiped them out. Cro-Magnons probably didn't like them because of cannibalism, but you see it going all the way through. And with the Romans wiped out a lot of people in Ireland. They wiped out the Picts and stuff, I think. And the reason was because the Druids, they were repulsed. The Romans didn't mind much. They were pretty debauched. But one thing that really got under their skin was cannibalism. Romans had this real thing about cannibalism. They didn't like it. And there's accounts of them killing Druids and stuff because they didn't like the cannibalistic rituals. But I think the Druids are the remnants of Neanderthals, the Celtic types and stuff. Even in Russia too, there's this kind of strong folk memory of cannibalism, and it's like a famine barely has to start in Russia, and they're all tucking into each other. That there's a more than just a folk memory going on there. It's kind of inbred, I think.
That brings me to think
that
one of the topic that we had, that you had, Hugh, offered was to talk about the archetypes. I know this might be a transition, but I am very ignorant in Carl Jung. I've learned a bit generally about it, and I think we talk about unconscious, we talk about archetypes, we talk about shadow, these terms that come in the conversation a lot. And I would be really grateful if we could have a bit of maybe not now because we talk about diet and stuff, but when you started to put in my mind the idea of cannibalism, the old ideas, it's just suddenly the word archetype came, and I associated it with the topic of today. I don't know if
Well, it is one of the topics, so we should talk about it. So
I don't know what the group says. But,
It's a good segue. The cannibalistic archetype, the white man.
the shadow. Yeah. So what I think about Jungian archetypes is I think Jung and Freud, to a certain extent, they were really kind of idiosyncratic about their theories. They were large part of them were cultural. They emphasized a lot more culture than they should have. But I think if you look at the Jungian archetypes, what he's doing is he's really observing the layered brain. And so, what he calls the conscious is the alien cortex, the id and the ego, the self is the alien cortex. And then the shadow is all the other four layers. It's like the alien cortex can tell, oh, there's a hell of a lot going on underneath under the covers. And so that's what the shadow is. You can see they kind of pick out all these things which are clearly, in my view, you're better off saying they're part of the layered brain. So, for example, if you look at things like the persona, he's clearly looking, he's getting glimpses of the primate. Because it's only, primates are the first evolutionary stage that we got to where people would actually give a false front. In other words, if ethologists like Frans de Waal, he writes about things about how dealing with chimpanzees and stuff, that they will fake you out. They will give false impressions. They will actually wear a mask. One of the things he mentioned was that there was one of the chimps in the facility where he was basically a zoo or lab, and then that chimp would like squirting water at people and at human beings too. And so he said, he could see that the chimp had a mouthful of water. And he said, I can see you. I know you've got a mouthful of water. And then the chimp swallowed it and went, ha, like, oh, got me. And that's very much that kind of social interaction of actually, getting fun out of that mischievous. So Jung also talks about the trickster and stuff like that. What he's looking at is the primate brain, that kind of getting joy. Monkeys like teasing each other and stuff, and it's a kind of social game of one-upmanship and stuff. They get a huge buzz out of it as social animals, and so you can clearly see that's what he's talking about. It's our primate brain. I mean, when we were shrews or little mammals, we didn't have any use for that. There's not a lot of use for hamsters and stuff to put on false expressions and to try and fake people out or to tease each other and stuff. They just didn't have the need in that environment. So I think it's way better to see it as an evolutionary layer, and then it all comes out, and then it's not cultural and it's not idiosyncratic. But yeah, Jungian archetypes, if you look at things like the old man is one of his archetypes, the Senex, and that old man is clearly your alien cortex. And then the child or the little girl, and he's seeing the mammalian brain, each one of these things. And then eventually they get to modern psychology and they have the big 5 personality types, which as far as I can tell were just sucked out of their ass. But they just took 5 personality types and then just completely random as far as I can tell. And then they said, oh, well, they're valid because statistically speaking, they're non-overlapping. It's like, really, that's its pedigree? It's like, come on, this is pathetic. In the annals of human understanding, we've never got so low as the 5 personality types. But the 5 personality types also, you can see the layered brain model. You can see agreeableness. Women score very highly on agreeableness. Why? because it's the mammalian brain. They're just looking at the mammalian brains. Each one of these things, you know, conscientious, oh, it's the alien cortex. You know, you can clearly see that they're seeing the 5 evolutionary layers, and it's just better to just call them that. But that leads into that other exercise of observing those layers in the moment. And it's a very good day when you can see a McDonald's and see like, oh, I feel like a burger. And then you don't change it, you don't try and suppress it, but you say, wow, that's my, you know, if people had that language, if we had it as part of our culture to say, oh, my reptilian brain feels like a burger, that would be quite a completely different society and a much more enlightened society. So, for example, in wokeism and stuff like that, you wouldn't say like, you know, oh, you're prejudiced. You say like, oh, you know, you've got a very strong reptilian response to the other. That's far more enlightened than saying you're a fucking racist. It's like, where do you go with you're a fucking racist? You see, the mere fact that they say something like you're a fucking racist is that word fuck is a straight appeal, a direct appeal to the reptilian brain. The word fuck is a motive trigger word for the reptilian brain. That's one of its 4 functions, 4 Fs, you know. And so basically the word fuck is just like, you know, the reason why you don't say fuck in polite society is because polite society is your primate brain, social hierarchy, and your alien cortex, which wants everything sanitized, it wants control, and it's kind of like, doesn't like the reptilian part of your brain getting uppity. So your alien cortex is suppressing all the lower layers. That's where Jung and Freud gets to this idea that we have the conscious and unconscious, and they're in conflict with each other. It's really kind of Viennese society, and Vienna of their time is pure alien cortex. So they're taking that and saying, well, you know, there's a lot of rumbling going on down in the other layers. There's a reptilian brain and stuff. And then in Viennese society, quash that, basically, you must not be a reptile, you know, keep your tail in your monkey suit, you know, basically it's all coat and tails and black and white, you know. Look at all the squares and stuff. You know, it's, you know, representation, symbolism, all these things, substitution, inversion, all the things you can see of the alien cortex. Vienna was alien cortex city. And so, you know, they don't like this unruly reptile coming, you know, and upsetting that kind of rarefied atmosphere. So, yeah, so then that's where Freud says, you know, we have these instincts of, you know, the shadow, those base instincts. It's just saying, yeah, we've got a reptilian brain. Hoo-ha. Well, it was not a great discovery. It's kind of obvious. But then you see how important languages and stuff for triggering parts of the brain. So it would be a very good thing is if you got to the point where you're observing, you're doing the exercise of observing which part of the 5-layered brain is being triggered by stuff. So if you, I mean, go this far. If you walked into a Viennese ball, go through this thought exercise. Here's a Viennese ball. Everybody, it's like the sound of music, and there's the Van Trapp family. They all arranged nicely from, you know, highest to lowest. Who does that? Alien cortex, of course. It's all arranged, but it's also a hierarchy. So got a bit of primate brain there. So you walk into the dance floor. It's square. Okay, it's geometric. It's black and white. It's checkered tiles. You know, that's what the dance floor is going to be. So you know, black and white. There's monotone. The tiles. You know, this is alien cortex. It's music and language and stuff like that. So you know, it's all highbrow. It's alien cortex. And so if you look at a scene like that and just observe, saying, that's the primate brain. And then say, oh, this person is putting on a mask. They've got a false persona. Well, they're doing that for, you know, one-upmanship on the primate brain, and it's golden to see that in other people. But if you can see it in yourself, then that's a real victory. But just imagine how different our world would be is if people, didn't use emotive categories like left wing and right wing and conservative and liberal and stuff, and just say, yeah, you say, instead of saying, we must be compassionate and loving, it would be much better if our culture said, I have a very hyperactive mammalian brain. Because you see, as the minute you say that, you've objectivized it and neutralized it. So it doesn't have any more power.
Yeah. Hugh, can I interrupt? Sorry, but a lot of the sarcasm and parody and that come out in some of the comments that you make and on Reddit and that, I think is an acknowledgement of that by restating a thing another way to wake people out of the conventional way of expressing a situation.
Yeah,
I just can't think of any.
What I'm usually doing is using the mirror. So basically, if people are all mad, they're all fucking barking, psychotic mad. So and dangerous, vaguely dangerous too. So what I'm doing is mirroring back so that they can see themselves. It's exactly what you're doing yourself with this exercise. So this exercise is an exercise of self-observation. All the ones I've given you are really exercise in self-observation. So because these people are not self-observant, and we don't teach our children to, we don't educate in schools for self-observation, just basically self-aggrandization and stuff like that. The self-esteem movement is really bolsters really egotism. So, but this is the opposite. This undermines egotism, and since people are not trained to have any self-awareness, I'm doing them the favor of presenting their bullshit back to them in the mirror. So that's in general what I'm doing. A lot of the time, just aggravating people, and also trying to just weed them out, because they're a lot of people are getting entertainment out of this, and that's going nowhere. Yeah, if you want to be on a journey of self-improvement and you're just out for a bit of entertainment, you can fuck right off, because it's utterly counterproductive to you and to everybody else. This is hard work and it's painful. So basically, I go out of my way to try and, I don't really ban people in this. They're just hostile and try. There have been, I think, I banned 2 people on ExoMed, and they were actively just trolling to destroy the whole thing. So then those are obvious things that they're just trying to shut down free speech, in fact. But in general, the other types are just guys who don't get the program, like people who have been on this a little while and they just come in cold and they think it's just entertainment and stuff. And then I will try to give them a run around and try and reflect them back. But if they turn out to get a kick out of it and think this is kind of sport, then I'll get harsher and harsher and try to get them off to just fuck off and get the entertainment somewhere else. And the reason is that a group like this is it all comes from what we're doing is really a cult. I mean, there's no way, there's no denying it. But where it comes from is my training in cults and stuff, and what Gurdjieff said. So like what Gurdjieff said, and this is stinking true, is that there's only so much gold leaf. He called it like gold leaf to go around. He says that in any time we are talking about where this memory comes from, where efforts comes from, and say it's just grace. Well, that grace Gurdjieff called like gold leaf. So he said that basically you get these people that are born from time to time just by accident that have higher levels of awareness and more enlightened type of beings. If no one knows why, it's just part of the universe's game. And then he says, but they only have so much to give. They can only take a small group of people so far, and you kind of run out of substance. So it can be diluted. You can have, it's kind of like an elixir that you can spread them. A one drop. You can do like Eckhart Tolle. He's doing like one drop amongst thousands and thousands of people. So he spreads very, very thin. He spreads his kind of his light very, very thin. The Gurdjieff way is to be more intense with a few number of people, and so that's the tradition I was educated in. So the idea is you can't have too many time wasters and bullshit artists. You're better off having some people that actually know have some inclination of what's going on and want to actually improve and get somewhere. And in that case, you have to weed out. You have to do a bit of chucking out, because people will come with all sorts of motives, for a lot of people, they just fucking around, But I take this kind of seriously, and I think that if it is as I think it is, and we're all heading for collapse, you want to make the most out of the time that's left, and the best use that I can think of for the time that's left is enlightenment. It's getting the full money's worth for the journey. It's kind of like we didn't ask to go on this ride, but now that we're on it, we want to get our full money's worth, right? And so the way to get it is with these kind of exercises and stuff. The way not to do it is to suck other people's essence. So a large part of our culture and what we're doing is we're in a game of vampirism, and so we have all these people that are they've set up a monetary system to suck our lifeblood, our energy, our essence. In effect, that's what capitalism is doing. What these guys like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos is they're vampires. They're literally sucking your energy and attention, your lifeblood. There are thousands and thousands of employees in Amazon that have been reduced to robots just so that Jeff Bezos can accumulate wealth. And so you can take what I think that's why Gurdjieff called it gold leaf, because it does really translate into money in our society, because you have to put in creative attention and effort to actually accumulate money. And these people have unearned money. They're taking it off people that are put into the system by work. By work, I mean very broadly. Their intent. Work is really stuff going on in your head, and it's not just muscular work. It's imagination. It's enlightenment. It's a lot of verbal energy. There's a tremendous amount of energy that goes into a dollar, and they're taking it. That's how they steal it. They have unearned income in the system that they've set up. So that is the conspiracy that's going on. But what it means is that to break away from that, you need a breakaway group like this. And the way to free a slave is enlightenment. So the first step is to see themselves and see the plantation for what it is, and then that's the whole thing. What else would you want as in the time before collapse? What else do you want as a slave other than freedom? The plantation is going to burn down. It's the least you could have, right?
Yeah, for sure. Oh, can I ask you a quick question about the layered brain exercise? So I didn't quite do it yet, but I was thinking about it, like running, in my head, what it would be like. So you acknowledge the other 4 layers, the shadow, and what I was thinking was like, so how that one time you're talking about how on the internet people are watching like cute fuzzy animal videos and triggering the mammalian brain. So like you step back and you see the alien cortex, running, like a narrative or whatever to like trigger the other layers out of nowhere. So Is that what we're trying to neutralize there? Stepping back and be like, hey, why are you doing that to the layered brain? You're lying.
It's not so much to suppress it or change it. Don't try and change anything. Just observe it. It will change. You can't help bringing it out into the light and seeing a change. But you don't want to try and force some result. It's good to see, just go through and interpret the world around you in those ways. So in other words, if you walk down the street, you kind of do it with, your I Live glasses on, and you look at adverts and you say, what's that advert trying to stimulate? If you know how advertisers work, you can see, they're trying to do blue. They're trying to invoke, a lot of banks and stuff, they often have blue as a color. And that's because research shows that that's a color that engenders trust. And then you say, okay, they're trying to get your mammalian brain. Then they'll do something like, you'll see an ad for, say, a car. And then the car is like, generally a car would be an appeal to your reptilian brain. They often make cars, black, and they tint the windows because your reptilian brain, it seems that in our evolutionary history, the eye was very important to dinosaurs and lizard brain and stuff. It's kind of like when the Tiktaalik crawled out of the primordial seas onto land, it was suddenly got high visual acuity because, could see in air. There's the water's more turbid, and you don't have high visibility that often and longer range in water, and it's darker. So when we seem to have crawled out onto land, the eye seemed to have become inordinately important in the long-range eye. So it seems to have been built in at that layer of the reptilian brain. And also, we had a light spot, basically the pineal gland it is today. But that is part and parcel. Amphibians use that as a light director. So light in the eye and stuff is very important for the reptilian brain. So when you look at a car, then you'll see they'll have tinted windows because ambush is also an important thing for, it seems like a lot of what dinosaurs were doing to each other were jumping on each other, and they were ambushing each other. So you see cops. If you walk down the street, you'll see cops. The cops are working from the reptilian brain. A lot of what they do, a lot of people join a police force because they are addicted to adrenaline. It's pure reptilian brain shit. What they don't know is they reveal all their psychology in these kind of archetypal ways, and one of them is they have shades. Cops love, especially reflective sunglasses. Because that's a reptilian thing, is you can't see what I'm looking at. I can get the jump on you. It's a power trip, and it's pure reptilian brain. Then look at Riot Police. They all dressed like the Ninja Turtles. They have fucking armor, and you say, and what do they drive around in? Some armored vehicles are called turtles. It's like you can't make this shit up. But they love the green and the black. The boot, right? The Nazi boot is basically trying to hide the mammalian foot, because our foot is very primate, right? So there's nothing that sucks more for your reptilian brain to have, a foot. Those kind of shoes, I can't remember what they're called, drugs or whatever. No, they kind of, they're repulsive neoprene things that make your toes stand out. What they like to have, those things, I can't remember what they're called.
Yeah.
In essence, if you see somebody wearing them, they look ridiculous. They look like monkey feet. and so they're triggering your as a marketer, you could have told those guys, look, this is never going to go anywhere as a shoe, because shoes, nobody wants to have a foot that appeals to your primate brain. You want to cover up that foot in like a boot, and then it's like, like if you have like jack boots and Nazis and stuff, they're trying to appeal to power and intimidate, and basically they're territorial. They're trying to appeal to your reptilian brain. So they have a boot on and stuff, and it's basically covers the primate foot. and so they all, as you walk down the street, it's very useful to see, okay, straight up, you can look a guy up and down and say, this guy, he wants to be a fucking T-Rex, he's like, and then you know, okay, he's straight from there. And then as you get better in this, you know how to deal with people at that level. You can appeal to him, that it's all about fight and flight and sex and territoriality and stuff. And so in those situations, I mean, I had one just the other day. I had to go to the police station over here, and they all have reptilian brains. And then the guy was hostile to me, and it was basically territorial thing. Yeah, everybody knows I'm in Greece. So anyway, he got hostile, saying like, "Why are you in Greece? Why?" Like this. And I said, "Ah, blah blah blah." Alien cortex answer. And then he said it again, like really harsh, like, "Why are you in Greece?" Like fuck off, you foreigner. He's behind the desk of the police station. It's a very intimidating thing. But instantly, like, because he's from the reptilian brain, then it's all about territoriality, us and them and stuff. I don't speak Greek, but the best I could do was saying, "Greece is the best country in the world. Why wouldn't I want to be in Greece?" Suddenly he went like, "Oh, this guy's okay."
And what about smell? I had that question. The strong sense of smell in the brain, in the layered brain.
Yes, you must.
Because it's kind of confusing where it would,
Yes, you must be very careful of smell. Smell is in the fish brain, and this is territory which is not politically correct. A lot of what signals the other is smell, right? It's pheromones. You see, a lot of this was something that came up in South Africa when they did Truth and Reconciliation. They had to integrate the two armies that were fighting each other, and so they had to do training on, reconciling races that have been completely segregated, right? And more than segregated, fighting each other in the bush. So then they had to, you kind of, it's like fighting the Nazis one day, then suddenly all is forgiven, and then you have to, the SS unit is going to be put in your allied unit. You have to work with them, and it's like, fuck, this is not easy. One of the things they told them in the training was they knew what they were talking about. And they said, what the research shows is smell is very, very important. Now, it came for a big revelation for whites and blacks. They both thought that they were the only ones that thought the other ones smelled. So white people always thought that Africans smelled because they have this like rich, fruity kind of smell, but that's just associated with white people, just associated with Africans in Africa. You don't really want to talk about this stuff because it's completely politically incorrect. Both sides were shocked during this training to find out that they weren't the only ones that thought the other side smelled. So white people were shocked to discover. White people thought, well, if you ask white people, we don't smell. Oh, yes, we do. And they're like, really? What do we smell of? And the black people said, you smell like death. And I went, what the fuck? What do you mean we smell like death? Look, we smell nice. We smell perfumed. And they said, that's the smell of death. And so basically each realized that basically things like that are really important in terms of smell. But you see, once you know that, you've elevated, both sides have then elevated it to the alien cortex. So then they basically, it's not like, the other races start to smell differently. A lot of the time it's below your level of consciousness. Usually it's below your level of consciousness. But those pheromones and that, it's all going on in Jung's shadow. Basically, why all wokeism and stuff is just stupid is because it's just in the alien cortex and it's suppressing the other layers. But the other layers, they don't suppress that way. You can't say, it's only, race is only skin deep. It's race is a social construct. That's the bullshit the left tells themselves. It's like, it's not. It's a biological construct. I say, oh no, it was invented in the 17th century. Was one person was telling me that's like complete crap. But what the science shows is that if they do what's called the T-shirt test, they can do a smell test, and it has different results. And basically, for women, it depends on what time in estrus it is and stuff. And so for men, it's quite completely different. A woman, what women are trying to do in general as what they call a sexual strategy or reproductive strategy is they're trying to get as much variation as possible. So from the point of view of like a disease model, they assume it's much better for you to actually have kids with somebody who's very genetically distant from you. That's probably the most robust way. Now, that's kind of fish-brainy, reptilian brain stuff. If you get a bit higher, then it's in complete conflict with, say, the reptilian brain's territoriality and in-group, out-group effect. In the mammalian brain, oxytocin also has an in-group and out-group effect, right? And by the time you get to the primate level brain, it's all about, who you are, where you are in the in the hierarchy, whether you're part of the tribe or outside the tribe. And so each one of these things interprets as. So we're completely dysfunctional, pretending that we're all in the alien cortex and we're all debating this stuff online as if we're intellectualizing all the stuff. Meanwhile, there's a completely different conversation going on in each one of these different layers. The primate brain is screaming at you that, this is a different race. This is going to rape my daughter. And it's like, we have to say, shut up, shut up, shut up. And that's why we have cancel culture. It's the alien cortex saying, shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up. And basically everybody's under a fucking pressure cooker. So that's what Jung and Freud found. They found that all these layers were with odds with each other. So the net effect is a huge drain in terms of psyche and energy, and it only gets worse. Basically, this kind of gender pronoun thing and stuff, it means you have to work hard all the time to think of the correct gender pronoun. It's completely artificial, and it takes work. So we kind of neurotic in the Freudian sense because we're working against ourselves. When we came in on the thing, I said, if you see something and you're spontaneous about it, like, see, there's a dirty sink, and instantly you think, oh, that needs to be clean. You have the energy to do it straight away. But if you had cross purposes, then you have no energy because one side is defeating the other. It's kind of like the opposites are working against each other, and that's what we're doing internally. And wokeism puts an extra layer of that. You're saying is that like you must work harder to suppress those other layers, and so it's completely in the alien cortex, and it's saying like, I don't care how much stress you have as a working slave. Here's some more stress. You've got to double down on your alien on your reptilian brain and what it's trying to tell you, and it's trying to tell you stuff like, this is bad mojo. This reptile smells differently. Then the primate brain is trying to say this is an out group and this is different in the hierarchy, and there's this civil war going on in people's heads in terms of the layered brain, and then you've got to put a lid on that. And so like, why do you think it explodes? Why do you think we have a capital riot? It's literally the other reptilian, it's the other layers of the brain exploding. And so you can't just put them in a pressure cooker and shove a lid on it. So wokeism is coming from the alien cortex, no understanding of human psychology. And then you've got this left-wing stuff, which is just complete nonsense about how gender is a social construct, and just horseshit, endless horseshit. Race was a concept invented by colonialists in the 17th century. Oh fuck, I can rattle these off for you. They're just complete horseshit that comes from the alien cortex.
Thank you so much for that. That's so clear. Thank you, really. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So anyway, it's no wonder there's tension in these things. But yeah, if you go back to civil rights movement and that, it's very hard to explain it to kids because it doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, black and white people were segregated, And then Martin Luther King came along and said, I have a dream that this is stupid and we shouldn't be doing this shit. And now nobody does that anymore. And what the fuck were those people thinking? And it's like, no. You're just completely pretending that it's all in. It's just completely pretending that it's all in the alien cortex. If you want to understand the civil rights movement was happening round about the reptilian brain. So to even begin to understand the North-South divide or the politics of racism or slavery, you've got to understand the reptilian brain and the whole thing that was going on there. So we haven't got a hope because we don't understand ourselves. The tools are not there. But self-observation and these things that I'm explaining to you are a way to get there. So nothing changes. You see, everybody thinks that the world should be other than it is. And that's probably not a good point to come in on. So this idealism comes from the alien cortex. And so people just can't get it. We're going extinct because of this. Because we think the world has to be something other than it is. It's like, if I like to play with people and stuff, and they say, well, that's horrible because it's racist. I'm like, really? Why shouldn't you be racist? And I go, I'm not really sure. I was told it was wrong, but I can't remember why now. I mean, well, it's just horrible when people just don't get on and there's violence. Well, what's wrong with violence? Well, it's not nice. What in you is making you think that things should be nice? So people think that everything should be other than it is. I'll just tell you one small anecdote here. When I came to America first, I came to California, Los Angeles. And when I had a friend who came with me from Australia, but he was feral like me and quite a trickster. He also liked needling people and trying to raise their consciousness. So we did this as a team sport, and one of the things we used to do is say this kind of thing to people. Is like saying just challenge their basic assumptions of things like race and say like they say like, well, that's racist, and you go like, what's wrong with that? Why shouldn't you be racist? And nobody ever asked them that question. And they didn't have a good answer. And soon they would be completely dissembling. And they didn't know whether they were Arthur or Martha because they have all these unexamined assumptions.
Yeah, it's like playing devil's advocate, right?
Yeah.
I do that all the time. It's so much fun.
yeah. Well, it's a great service because it's shamanic. It's basically it's a sacred role, and it's the role of the fool. And if basically you're risking your head all the time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But people do actually like it, and many people came afterwards. After that era in Los Angeles and thanked me personally and said, you completely turned my world upside down.
Well, it's funny you say that because I used to use that method with some psychiatric patients, so-called psychiatric, that used to fall on my lap when I was covering for other doctors. And I would do the same sort of thing. They'd come in for medications and they'd tell me I have, paranoid schizophrenia. And I would tell them that what is paranoid schizophrenia? Have you questioned that? And what is it? And why does it make you sick? And what is wrong about it? And then little by little we'd go around, talking about the environment, the world we live in, and stuff like that. And I was thanked by a couple of them, 15 years ago, to have pointed that out to them, to have just got them out of this kind of thinking, of not questioning like racism, psychiatric illness and stuff. I know it's a fantastic exercise to do. Fantastic.
Yeah, to question people's base assumptions.
Yes.
Is very, very good because we have all these things that we operate from that we just collected from our culture and indoctrination and stuff. And it was like, a lot of them are part of the slave narrative. So in particular, the one that comes to mind is being productive. Like infrequently on Reddit, you have people say, oh, that's counterproductive, or no, you got to be positive and be productive, and they say, why? And they can't imagine why. You say, look, the last thing this planet needs is more production. Like, we've overproduced, we've overconstructed, we need destruction, and basically we need less production. And people are like, what are you talking about? So like, clearly we've got enough production. We need the opposite now. And that people cannot get that around their head. It just does their head in. Because we've told you've got to be productive. You've got to actually, you've got to make money. Your worth in society is by being a productive member of society is good. And you say, like, why? Well, because then we've got more stuff. We've got too much stuff. Well, I know you would be productive. I can't say why.
Yeah, it's like you ask why, and the whole thing fucking implodes. Yeah,
It does.
because it's like why I linked that little cartoon on XRMed. The little girl asks why to her father, and then the alien cortex exploding. He's like, "I'm afraid," and it's like, yeah, there you go. That's why we're doing all this. We're afraid.
Yeah, if only anybody could be that honest, right?
Yeah, that's what I loved about it. It was so fucking human and honest. I'm like, wow, I have to link this because this is dynamite. Yeah, that was so good.
You think about what we were talking about, civil rights and stuff like that. You're not allowed to be afraid, right? You say, I don't like that race. You say, like, well, why not? Because I'm afraid. And you say, well, then they try and start an alien cortex argument for why you shouldn't be afraid. And so, like, well, why shouldn't I be afraid? But people take it as read that there's some idealistic place we need to get to where we all love each other, there's all harmony and stuff. And they're like, I don't think that's a good idea. Look at say this pandemic, right? They're very good reasons why we're tribal. One of them is separation from disease and stuff. We've got a monoculture that spreads through the whole world. We've put all our eggs in one basket. And we're getting to the stage now where our last hope, according to me, is like indigenous people. And we're giving them COVID. And, the very last gasp of this civilization as it collapses is to give them televisions and cell phones, and Bill Gates is in there trying to make sure they get wired and connected. And you say, like, that's a kind of a racism all of its own to say, everybody must be like me.
Yeah, I remember seeing a YouTube video of this anthropologist lady, and she said that the Son Bushman called her radio a devil in a box. It's like, it is a devil in a box.
They have no doubt. Yeah, in Africa, they couldn't get people to use money because they saw right through it. I get this game. Come.
That makes me think of a movie that was done in the late 70s, early 80s in Africa, Botswana. And it was called The Gods Must Be Crazy. I don't know if you have seen it.
I remember it. Yeah.
A bottle of Coke falls from a plane, and it just falls in the Kalahari, and he finds it and he brings it back to his tribe. And it starts this process of madness because he wants to bring the bottle back to the gods. So he has to leave his tribe because the bottle has caused terrible grief in the tribe. And it's a really, really good movie if you can watch it. The Gods Must Be Crazy.
Yeah, I remember it well.
It's a treat. It's a very, very good movie on that. And you'll see a lot of what we've talked about in it, all through the movie.
Yeah, it was easier for us to see in South Africa, growing up in South Africa. Everything was kind of like on high volume. And I think in the Western liberal tradition, everything's a bit too muted. People are not getting the subtleties. It's kind of what's happened is that slavery and things like that have been perfected. the liberal democracy is not like Steven Pinker in that says, he says, oh, there are less wars, there's less oppression, there's less slavery. It's not actually true. What's really happened is they've been integrated and been perfected so that now they're so subtle you can't see them. So it's much easier for somebody like me that grew up in Africa to see them because I've still got my eyes. You can't see the shades of grey. they're too muted.
It's all the violence, though, Hugh, and everything that is very overt in your, for instance, in your South African experience. But I often think that the way the Western societies are living now, the net amount of violence hasn't changed. It's simply become psychological violence, not physical violence.
And I feel it's worse. I feel instinctively that structural violence is infinitely worse than ordinary, hands-on violence, interpersonal. Yeah, I mean, for an African, somebody growing up in Africa, is this fetish about non-violence is more than suspicious. It's like, so like, well, you could say to an African like, oh no, violence is just completely evil. You can't have any violence. They say like, there's always the suspicion of why. it's almost like saying, oh no, we can't have oxygen. We can't have a blue sky. It's
Yeah,
like, what are you going to replace violence with?
I never agreed with nonviolence either because, when I was in high school, I got my ass kicked a lot by bullies, and the only way they stopped is when I doubled up my fist and put it in their face. So it's like, you got to be violent sometimes or they won't stop fucking with you.
Yeah.
You don't want to be a doormat monkey.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, this thing about that comes about the meek inherit the earth, and this Christian stuff. It's like Nietzsche said. It's a slave religion, and it's built for oppression. Christianity is evil. It's built for oppression.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But that's how they do it. They tell you that basically you must be meek. You must be. Why? Because they're exploiting you. They're vampires. Like they don't want you to stick up for yourself. They don't want you to fight back. They want you to be a good sheep and get farmed. So then it says like, I am the good shepherd and you are my flock. And it's like they're using the words here. It's like there ain't no good shepherds. They all eat mutton, guys. They all eat mutton, and we're it. So yeah, it's yeah. I must get onto that next video, which is going to do a bit of Christian bashing, but I think that'll be the end of me on YouTube. I think I'll get banned from YouTube.
Oh shit! Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
No, don't get banned on YouTube. No.
You could try to use a little bit of coded language.
Yeah.
I don't know how. I don't know how. I mean,
I don't know how either.
If people start complaining, that's the end of it.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think you have to worry too much about Christian bashing because there's that whole atheist thing on YouTube, and they just shit all over religion all the time on Islam and stuff. So you might be okay, honestly. I don't think you need to worry about it. Maybe as long as you're not saying like, destroy a church or whatever, you should be fine. Yeah, because all these guys are doing is like completely shitting on religion from, the atheist alien cortex point of view. So
yeah.
So you should be fine. Yeah, like those
Sam Harris and all those guys.
Exactly, those guys. So I think you'll be fine. I don't think you gotta worry about it.
Richard Dawkins. Yeah, it's equal opportunity here because I've spent the last few videos shitting on Dickie Dawkins. Now, I can join him in atheism.
Yes.
Equal opportunity basher. I am.
Yes.
But yeah. So anyway, what did we cover enough this time? Was there stuff that other stuff? Gary, was there other stuff you wanted to talk about?
Well, I just have one thing to ask, but I think perhaps we should not go too far, because everything seems to lead back to this need for the discussion about conspiracy theory, because there's so many things in what you said lead in that direction. But maybe just one thing I wanted to ask was in regard to earlier in the conversation with the novelty experiment and a shift in consciousness, is how we feel our alien cortex self as being the center of us. If that's what you feel first. You don't feel your real awareness, your real self, as being intimately a part of. In other words, what I'm thinking, for a person who's thinking about awakening, it's over there. I've got to reach it. It's away from me. It's not, and yet, if you look at it, that's the most central and intimate part of you. And so we've got this feeling that our ego self is the center of us, but our real self is somehow over to one side, or it's not. You don't feel that inside you. If you insult someone, they feel that centrally. This attack on their ego. If you're making if they have a moment of awareness, it's only a moment, and then they go back, and the centrality of that is lost. So I think I'm just really making a comment, that what we really are, we don't feel in the middle of ourselves the way we feel our imagined self as being the central part of us.
Yeah, that imagined self is wicked. So what Jung talked about self-actualization, and what he meant was integrating all those different parts. And if reinterpreted in terms of the layered brain, it meant that you integrated all of them so that they weren't in conflict with each other. And so he kind of represented that as like a mandala. In his big red book, he drew mandalas. He borrowed a lot from things like the Eastern tradition and Hinduism. And what they would do is they believed that by meditating and reflecting on a mandala, you could actually integrate all these different parts of you, quite mystic. And even to the extent that your guru could do a mandala, and then, basically he's kind of doing almost a mind map of his own mind is kind of the thinking, Western interpretation of it. And then the student could actually meditate on that and do a kind of mind meld with, by fusing that mandala in their own thinking, just by reflecting on it enough, meditating on enough.
Yeah, I was thinking about mandalas and how, even there in that analogy, that you still tend to automatically place your ego self right in the center, and where you're trying to get at in terms of awakening is somewhere on the periphery, instead of turning that completely around, trying to feel yourself, your real self, in the center.
You can't really, if you tell the truth, and all of this is really the way to liberation is radical truth telling. But if you tell yourself the truth, you have to admit, if you think about what really exists, really that point of ego is an absolute. So that point of ego that you're talking about is not something to deny, or something to think of yourself as, to try and get to an ego that's on some far horizon, or some liberation on some horizon. It is to go inward to that ego. So that ego is what they would call the Atman. And that is the universal self, but it's also a jiva, the personal self, right? So the Atman is inescapably between your two ears. In the Krishna tradition, and that say it's in your heart, but it doesn't feel that way to me. But there is a basis. I mean, there's a real scientific basis for it, and it's if you go to cosmology and the modern understanding of the Big Bang Theory, I like to fool with people and say to them, you know, like, okay, you've got this Big Bang, so you know everything is like streaming out from one point. So where is that point? Like, if you went, put a little signpost, maybe you know people could have tours to the center of to the center of the universe. It's at the center of the universe is right here. This is the point where everything is expanding away from, and you could get a round trip ticket to go and see it. It'd be a great tourist attraction in the center of the universe. You say, well, where is that? Is it in the Milky Way? Is it just off Andromeda? Which is the closest galaxy? Where would you have to go? Does anybody have an answer? Do they know the answer to this?
Yeah, it always seems like, I think they said something like the center of the universe is your point of reference, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So so what they've been saying this ages for thousands of years, maybe 8,000 they claim, popped out in the last century in Western cosmology, and they said every single point has a claim to be the center of the galaxy or center of the universe, not just the galaxy, and has an equal claim. So that's kind of weird, because if you go to the center of Andromeda, which is like the next door galaxy, anywhere you are in Andromeda, it looks like the Milky Way is disappearing from you and you're the center. And if you stand here on Earth inside the Milky Way, it looks like the exact opposite. And you say, which one is right? And the answer is they're all correct. So it comes back very close to the whole idea of the Brahma would be the entire universe. But you see, there's no way that the universe can't experience itself. It needs some kind of mechanism. It needs eyes and ears. It needs basically a nervous system in a way. Some kind of localized mechanism to experience its infinite self. And then that's the Atma. So it's kind of like, the universe could not experience itself unless it did it through you. And then you're in a bit of, as soon as you come to that realization, you're in a bit of trouble straight out. And the reason is how many yous are there? Well, if you're really, really fucking honest, there's only one. There's only you, right? If you think like Descartes and you say, what do I really know? If I don't assume anything, I don't assume other minds, I don't assume other people have shit going on in their heads. Like, what do I really, really know? All I know, I'm dreaming these other people. So what do I really know? Well, Descartes said, je pense donc je suis. I think, therefore I am. He said, one thing you know is that you are thinking, you are experiencing this. You are asking your question. That you know. No one can take that away from you, is that you are experiencing what you're experiencing while you're asking this question of basically, who is this person? So then you say, well, at least I know that. You don't know whether other people exist or not. But if you can thoroughly acknowledge yourself and say then, well, what is it? You say, well, so all I know is I'm sitting between my two ears experiencing this universe. It seems like a dream. It seems like you're in the Matrix and you're generating the Matrix and experiencing it at the same time. Your awareness of the universe is what creates it, right? And that's all you really know. Is basically you seem to be a simulator and creating the universe and observing it at the same time. So there really is only one Atman. That Atman is not duplicated. And that Atman is you. So it's intensely solipsistic. That basically you are in your own movie. You're the projector and you're actually the movie itself. So it's completely interluded. But once you get to that state, that's a very divine state. That's complete and utter solipsism. So it's the kind of solipsism that says it annihilates your fear of death, because it's saying like, well, as the experiencer of the universe, I can't really die. I assume I die because I see lots of examples and I can feel myself getting older. So I assume I'm going to die. But I don't really know that for a fact, but I assume that that's the case. But it doesn't seem that way. If you have this complete solipsism, then it's saying, well, what would really happen is the only one thing you're really sure of is your own experience of the universe. So you can't imagine that experience nullified. Therefore, when you die, it's not you dying, it's the universe going away. So in that inversion, you become the only thing that exists. And so you're saying, I cannot die because I cannot experience death. And basically what must be happening is the universe is like a dream going away. So it's for some unknown reason, I exist. I started having this dream of the universe. And then I assume at some stage the dream will end and it'll go away and it'll just be me existing.
It's sort of like that thing, like I think it was like Alan Watts said something like, "Oh, I think death is like going to sleep or waking up after having never gone to sleep and going to sleep and never waking up."
Yeah, but
Yeah.
the main thing is that it's we have a conception in ego before, say, on the progression of the octave, before do re mi, before the mi and the octave boundary there, is before that step, which you can call self-realization, is we have this idea that we exist as a jiva in the world endures, and we are going to snuff out. So we have the point of view of what most people think of us, because we can watch other people snuff out, but you can't watch yourself snuff out. If you try and watch yourself snuff out and die, just as you get to the exciting part, you're dead. So you never get to see it. So we assume, back to front view, that we can see people dropping dead left and right, and we assume that that's what will happen to us. So we assume that the prima mater and the universe endures, and we're about to drop dead. But that can't be so, because basically we couldn't experience that as a reality. There's no way you can experience death that way. So for the Atman, for us, if we're really honest, the universe dies. We don't.
I think it was possibly. Oh, Nisargadatta, that's right, made the comment. He said nothing that was real ever died, which I guess sums that up.
It's not the entire truth, but it is a stepping stone towards, basically really being one with the universe. Is you saying, we don't really understand what the hell's going on, and in terms of consciousness is something to do with electromagnetism, because you can prove it just by the fact that if I stop all electrical activity in your head, you're just completely not there. If you've ever been put under anesthetic, you know that you're just not there. It's like when you revived again, it's just an empty space. There's just like you don't have any memory. You don't have any memory of a gap. It's really under deep anesthetic. You're really not that. So it's a proof that when there's no electrical activity in your brain, there's no consciousness. But if all we are is really consciousness, so if you say, well, then how does electricity just do its thing? Basically, neurons pop on and off, and Kayabanga, there I am, having the observations and thoughts. No one has a damn clue why, but that certainly seems to be the case. This is something to do with electromagnetism and energy transfers going on in space. So
yeah, that's likely a reflection of a much more subtle process, like a how could I put it? Like a parallel in the more material realm of something that is using finer energy.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's funny. It's just energy, right? So energy can be transferred into other stuff, but it's just energy. And so you say, well, why does energy experience itself? why when we look at the sun, we're looking at a big ball of energy. It's mainly electromagnetic and fusion and stuff. But why are all these energy transfers just winding up as a conscious experience? And when you start to ponder that enough, then you can get to the one of the universe, because you're saying, well, you're an aggregation of, chinops, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur. And it's like, that's not going anywhere when you die, right? It's still there. All your body materials there. It just gets, transferred into other states of energy and stuff. But there's no molecule that exists now that doesn't exist after you're dead. And in fact, even the energy will be just passed on to other energy states as far as we know. So you say, like, well, you're just kind of an aggregation of the stuff that the universe does and energy passing through it.
It's almost... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, you get to a stage where you think, well, I just come together like an illusion, almost like a fish, basically in a shoal, coming together and making the impression of a big fish, when, or a flock of birds coming together and making, a pattern in the sky, and then dispersing again. So you kind of aggregate together, you get a whole lot of electrical activity, and then you disperse again. But there's no real loss in there. But while all those things come together, then the eye can see itself, then the universe can see itself, and apparently that's the only way it gets to see itself, is through our eyes. So we literally are the gods. We literally are the Atman.
Yeah, so it's that coming together, that aggregation, that gives rise to the separate consciousness, or the ability.
But then you see, other people also disappear when you step out of the solipsism, because you can see that although you don't have access to the electromagnetism and stuff going on in people's heads, you can infer it's, electron is an electron. I strongly suspect that there's not more than one electron. I think the electrons and photons, there's only one. Richard Feynman had that idea too, and he didn't pursue it. I think maybe Hermann Weyl also had that idea. But at various times, physicists have come to the conclusion, like, maybe there is only one electron. And it's just kind of duplicating itself. And I think that that's correct. Richard Feynman didn't pursue it because he couldn't make the maths work. But the reason why you can't make the maths work is because it's fractal and involuted. So that's.
But even to go that far here into the necessity to create anything material in the universe at all, there's no necessity for that. If it can all be dreamed is not a good word for it. But why does anything material? There's no need for it to be there. I mean, the simple way I put it is that, why would God bother making stuff when He can just you can experience everything without stuff? It's only got to arrive.
No, you can't. You can't experience anything without stuff. That's the whole point. That's why we are stuff. You see, nothing, unless you have electromagnetism going around. If you got photons or electrons just in a beam, they ain't doing diddly squat.
Yeah, I'm thinking more of like, there's a certain kind of dream you can have, which is extremely convincing. And people have had these kinds of dreams where, for instance, they solve some kind of problem, some terribly complex problem during the dream, and it's absolutely satisfactory on every level and completely convincing. And then they wake up and find that it was just nonsense. But at a certain level, isn't our reality operating that way? that it's only got to be
Yeah.
convincing. It doesn't really need to be anything.
Yes. Yeah, so you can tell a lot about people's spiritual status and advance by how they talk about solipsism. So you get people that are very, kind of alien cortex and not very well steeped in the concept. No, their understanding is shallow, and they say, well, solipsism isn't valid because you can Shakespeare and Mozart exist, and you don't have the skill or talent to duplicate Mozart or Shakespeare. You see that argument sometimes. It's a very shallow argument because it's like saying the best way to understand solipsism is to think of it like you were talking about it as a dream. So like a dream you had last night. So then what they're saying is ridiculous, because what they're saying is, well, solipsism can't be the case because, I had a dream last night of Mozart. And then somebody will say, like, you can't have dreamed of Mozart. And I said, yeah, I did. He was there playing the piano. And he said, no, you can't have, because you don't have the talent to play a piano as well as Mozart. Therefore, you couldn't have dreamed of Mozart. So I said, it's ridiculous. Of course you can dream of Mozart on the piano, even if you don't even know how to compose music. But further to what you were just alluding to is it's not even necessary that you even have the ability to imagine Mozart playing music. You also, as the observer, can manufacture as part of the dream that I dreamed it was fantastic music as well.
Yeah.
So the value judgment and the qualification of the dream itself is also in the dream. So it means everything is in this hermeneutical circle, and it really is part of the dream. So solipsism is inviolate, it is absolute, and there's no way of proving that you're not having a dream. So the way of dreaming this entire world like a virtual simulation. So what you were saying then about why would God create stuff to do that? And the traditional answer was for delight. Basically, this was in terms of Advaita Vedanta, that the whole universe was considered Leela, and it was considered the play. And so it's the same reason why you watch YouTube, Netflix, and go to the movies. It's like, this is God's way of going to the movies. So God has the power to create the universe and experience it at the same time, and just does it for onanistic self-masturbation. It's basically what the universe is. Or more politely put, it's just God enjoying God. But if you spend enough time doing these exercises, particularly the first one I said of grounding yourself, you can get to the stage where you really feel that. So I think, good, Jeff.
Yeah, but I mean, in a way, Hugh, with those exercises, you come to a point of awareness.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But yes, you do, but it's not an experience. You don't know that in the same way. You can't because there's not two of you at that point.
Exactly.
Your dualism collapses. And
yeah,
so
that's Advaita Vedanta. Yeah, right there. Yeah.
That's why I put up that video. I mean, I know it was rather religiously dealt with, but I was just trying to draw attention to some of those concepts. That's all. And so you can't. When you're like that, you can't give a description of that. The part of you that gives descriptions of things isn't there anymore. You in a way you've left the material, you've left the whatever you would call it, the manifest universe, and you're in a state where you can't describe it. It doesn't have it. It's like, I think what they're in the Advaita, where they're talking about the Brahman, but the Brahman must be beyond qualities.
No, it's not quite beyond qualities. So it has the quality of Satchitananda. So consciousness, knowledge, and bliss. So it's really a state of transcendence. If you do that exercise enough, you'll get to a point. I think it was Gurdjieff that said, so somebody asked him, like, when will I know that I might be making this up, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Somebody asked Gurdjieff, this is like, when do I know that I'm enlightened? And he said something like, when you on a bicycle riding down the road and you realize that you're the absolute, or the Atman, riding on the Atman, through the Atman, for the joy of the Atman, then you know. But that includes Satchitananda. So then you would have Sat is consciousness. So you know that you're riding the bicycle. If you're dreaming, and that's what we're doing, that's why this thing about the novelty exercises, if you're dreaming about where you're going, or the cars around you while you're riding a bike, or you're thinking about your bank balance, or how you're late for work or something, you're not really on your bike. If you're consciously on your bike and everything that's filling your head is really the sensory experience of being on your bike, and that's all, then that's consciousness. So then knowledge is the knowledge of observing that. You know you're on your bike. So you're not just riding your bike and conscious and having the experience. You know that it's you on the bike. It's knowledge of self riding the bike. You have no doubt that you are riding the bike. And that experience then leads naturally to bliss. And then that's what traditionally they say, is that Ananda is the natural state of bliss, if there's nothing else cocking it up. Oh, wait, you're muted.
Sorry, aren't you at some stage in process of going through Satchitananda? You abandon the you have to. There has to be a unitary thing occur, doesn't there? You can't simultaneously be aware of what you're doing and doing it as two separate things. You're coming to a point of.
It's completely integrated. It's completely
integrated. That's what I'm trying to say.
So
yeah.
It's like Americans have this annoying habit of saying, like you might be at Disneyland or something, and they say, "Hey kids, are you having fun?" And that always used to really annoy me, because it's just kind of like, I was having fun until you said that. So you started thinking, am I having fun or not? That fucking ruined the fun.
That's why, we can't do it now, Hugh. So I wanted to have the discussion going back to that original thing when Ecubeni made his little bit of comment, and you said, I bet you weren't awake while you were writing that. And that led to this thought about the different ways of being conscious of yourself and what you're doing. And what you've done there is like the example of the people on a ride at the fair, and they spoils it for them because it cracks them out of their complete enjoyment of it, and makes them self-conscious in a way. And so you've got like, I had a whole list, but we can't go through it now, of being absorbed in something, immersed in something, being distracted, being inadvertent, and then you go on being self-conscious, and then they're dualistic consciousnesses. So when you're getting on further to what we're just saying about the observer and the process of going through existence, consciousness, bliss, and yet you don't not know that, but it's not the same as a self-conscious awareness.
So yeah, this is self-conscious awareness. So if you're just aware of some object, then you're fascinated, right? So you're captivated by that object. You might walk into a church or something like that and be completely overwhelmed, awestruck. Now that kind of awe is hypnotism. It's really you're asleep. You're outside yourself in that stuff, in what you're observing. You're lost. So this is where you're not lost. You actually there. It's exactly like making love, right? So it's like, imagine it like making love. It's like the world is your partner, the Leela, the universe is your partner. You can be completely lost and absorbed in them, which is kind of too much transference. It's basically you've lost yourself in the other, which is kind of a lower level of consciousness. You can be entirely in yourself and objectivizing your lover, in which case that's kind of egotistical and not a very high level of consciousness. But there's a unitary consciousness where you, in your own socks and shoes, you're in your own skin. It's making true love to a partner. And I mean, in this case, not just physical, I mean, there's like the universe I'm talking about. So it's basically, there's no separation in that highest form of consciousness and love. There's no separation between you, the object, and basically the unification of the two, right? So it's a complete unitary experience, but you can't leave the self out of it, otherwise that's partial, right? So it's not partial at all.
Yeah. No, I'm just trying to because there's this tendency to think that that's an experience. But if you say that it's an experience, then
it is an experience because it has a beginning and an end. So in a way, it's not really real, but in another way, it's the substrate of everything that's going on. I mean, it's as real as things get. So, awareness can't be just a burning light that just sits like a lantern and an eternal flame just always on. It must wax and wane and take on different forms and colors and hues and attributes, right? It's basically, light does play in that way. You can't just have one solid, shining, burning light with it just stays constant. It's got to come into focus and go out, and then that is, well, at least while we're alive. I mean, that's what life is the enjoyment of that, and those transformations as it kind of flickers, But the light has to, the light of consciousness has to shine on something and be transformed as it goes. Otherwise, if there was no change, there would be no action. And if there was no action, it's death, you wouldn't be conscious. So consciousness can only see the changes. You can only see energy playing in space, right? So there has to be some movement and play of energy for the mind to see itself.
Yeah.
That's the essence of being alive, right?
Yeah, it's like don't just watch the fireflies, go play with them.
Yeah, but you can't just have a firefly in empty space. The fireflies have to move and they have to play to exist. Light has to move. There is a speed of light that's c, and you can't freeze it, right? It's like putting moonbeams in a jar. You can't put a moonbeam in a jar.
Would you say that for consciousness to know itself, things would need to occur? That if nothing is occurring, it doesn't mean that consciousness has stopped existing. It's just not known. It doesn't. I'm just thinking of consciousness as like the prima mater of the universe. It still needs to be there. for when something starts up. It's like when you're asleep, you know, and you wake up and you know you're awake because something is manifesting in consciousness, something's occurring. But when you're asleep, I guess the analogy is, well, nothing was occurring, so consciousness lost awareness of itself because there was just nothing. It didn't go away. It just wasn't aware of itself because nothing was occurring.
It does appear that way, but it's beyond what I know. I mean, I was just born, then I experienced this life, and I assume I'll die soon. And then basically I have no way of knowing whether, you know, that's all that ever was. There was just complete non-existence, complete non-blackness. Then the first memory I had all the way up until the last, and that's it. I have no way of knowing.
You don't know that.
That is the be all and end all, and it was just some blip in eternity. No one knows, at least for me, what that was. So you can't really answer that question at all, really. No one can know. It's beyond consciousness. It's kind of like seeing outside the bubble.
Yeah, I suppose you just sort of infer it because you wake up the next day and you appear to be the same person you were the day before. So there was some kind of continuity that was going on, even though you weren't there.
Yeah, the consciousness seems to be unitary, right? And it does seem to persist. So the reason why we think of ourselves as the same person is because consciousness is singular. And so if you think of an experience, you know, basically when if you have a clear memory of when you're a 9-year-old, you think, was that the same person experiencing it? It appears to be, yeah. It doesn't appear that observer. I mean, I have no sense at all that observer has changed. I mean, the attributes have changed. If I think back to a memory of when I was 9 years old, then it's the same person observing. There's a lot of other stuff around it, a lot of interpretation, a lot of attributes and kind of ornaments that have been hung around the person that I am today that experiences things. But the raw experience of, if you smell or hear, whatever the observer of that is, it doesn't seem to have changed throughout your whole life, right?
Yeah, that's what I was listening to a thing just the other day. Rupert Spira was talking about basically that the sense of yourself as a child and as you got progressively older, what is the feeling? The feeling of yourself has always remained the same. It hasn't changed. All this other stuff has gone on, but what you feel as yourself has remained the same the whole time. And I think he was trying to sort of connect that to a sense of the continuity of your consciousness, that feeling of what was continuous is not you, the person. It's it is the presence of your true self that hasn't gone away and hasn't been changed by anything. You know, that what they say, something like, you know, it doesn't arise and it doesn't disappear. It's just sort of always there. And we feel that in ourselves as the continuity of ourselves.
Yeah, so that's called aham in Hinduism. And in Sanskrit, it essentially means I am. So it's very interesting because, you know, in Genesis, it says, you know, who are, you know, Moses asked the burning bush, who are you? God, and he says, I am that I am. Basically, he's saying, you know, I am. Fuck off. I am. And that's essentially, aham is exactly like that. Now, aham is that feeling of aham or I am is the same as Brahman. And it's the essential feeling that really the only consciousness in the universe has, which is you, solipsistic you. And then everything else is ahamkara. And that means aham with kara's attribute, sheath. They often talk about a sheath. So it's this kind of analogy of you surrounded by this sheath of different attributes, experiences, all these kind of accoutrements, a changing body, all that kind of thing. They're all aspects of ego, right? That are
the
changing.
Coloring of consciousness.
Yeah. So all of those things are the attributes of consciousness, and then those are considered unreal because they're changing all the time. So you can't get back to how you were when you were a kid, or every time you experience something that's an ego attachment, it is ahankara, and that is kind of like a blind on the essential aham. It's kind of like a blinker on the essential aham. It's a qualification of it. So in terms of Jungian philosophy, then the self-actualization or the completing of the mandala is when there's no other karas, there are no attributes. It's just this pure light without obstacles. And a lot of the work that we're doing here is removal of those obstacles. So the reason why in Hinduism they pray to Ganesh, Ganesha is Ganesha is the elephant god, and it's the remover of obstacles. So they say that basically all these obstacles are these minor identifications, all these kind of things, our ego attachments and all our delusions of what we think we are, temporary things, identification with rank and race and our body identification, all the many identifications we have, then those are removed with this work, and then that's considered. Who's removing this? And nobody really knows. That's what they just say. The elephant god.
But there's also the fact that you if you've removed things, you in a sense have to get back in tune with what you are before those attributes. In other words, that come back to that feeling of that continuous feeling of yourself. So I think that's what's too hidden from us. We don't. We're not usually subtle enough to feel that. We feel the phenomena, but we don't feel ourselves.
Well, you can feel the blockage. What these obstacles are really neuroses, right? So they are things that are kind of like shutting off the light of consciousness, is one analogy that they often say. And so the way to see them is kind of a nexus of complication. We have all these in our thinking. We have kind of knots in our thinking. We have these contradictions. We have in one little frame in an alien cortex, we have this set of concepts, and it actually contradicts what we have in the next door frame. But the two frames never really meet, and the gap between them is kind of a neurosis. It's a complex that we have. It's just a little tangle. So if you, with enough reflection, then you get frame A to talk to frame B, and eventually everything just kind of disappears because you just get an open circuit, and it's kind of like open mic all the way through. So that's ironing out all those wrinkles and nexuses is really what Jung and Freud were doing, and it's the same stuff as this. But you have those in yourself, and we have those in our society. We have all these little knots and politics and stuff, and factionalism and stuff. So it's ironing out all those factions in your head till eventually they're unified. And one of the things that happens once you iron those out is you get a lot of energy, because it's kind of like your head's really like a swamp. It's kind of like a mangrove swamp, and the water doesn't really flow in it because there's so many tangles. But as you smooth out each one of these tangles from reflection and observation and stuff, the water starts to flow. And it's an analogy for energy, or consciousness, but then it starts to flow, and it quite literally, it means it has a physical manifestation in your neurons. So the energy does actually flow as electricity in your neurons. You will get more. Eventually, you have an epileptic fit. It's basically kind of an overload. It's kind of like the grid has too much electricity in it, and you will get to that stage. There's shortcuts to it, like using LSD or some hallucinogens and stuff like that. But I wouldn't recommend them, because you're not really getting the kinks out of the grid, and you're not really ironing out the complexes. You're just, putting a massive
Just forcing
amount
the
of
energy through.
yeah. You're short circuiting
Yeah.
you're just short circuiting bits of your brain, which is not really what you want to do. You want to iron out all the little nexuses and complexes, and then you have this free flow of electricity that then will give you that hallucinogenic experience without any artificial aid. And so then that's the point. You want to get to that. Once that happens, it's like, never really goes back again. You don't have to do gardening every day on that score. Yeah, you just have to happen once, right?
Yeah. Here it's quite a long talk. Should we leave it there? Or, yeah. Sorry, I probably shouldn't have brought that in late in the
Oh, that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm getting tired because it's too long, but I wish I had all that energy and continue, because we've gone far there. Do you know?
Yeah, we did a lot of.
Yeah.
I wish I was not tired now. Jesus.
Yeah, so it's sort of like being consciously, like being a bird in a cage and figuring out the bars and getting rid of them so you can, fly. Sort of, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but to see the all these are inside us, so they kind of like we have these kind of ganglions in our neural network, and you need to tease them out so that basically you can get a bit of energy flowing.
I take it this is what they mean in the Hindu idea of clearing nadis, clearing your energetic blockages is just another way of describing the same thing.
And chakras. So chakras are kind of a wheel. It's like spaghetti junction, but the nadis are just nerves, right? So it's basically, but then they would call what you're clearing out, they call it Sushumna. And so it's really this kind of fine energy which they would associate with breath. But that was their physiology. It's not ours in the West anymore. We think in terms of nerves and electrical impulses.
That's why I'm rather attracted to their descriptions in a way, because we get very top heavy with scientific understanding of these things, but then when you look back so far into the past and see that they could explain it perfectly well without having that scientific knowledge, and it was absolutely as effective.
They're describing it from the inside, so they're describing how it feels like, and then in the West we describe it objectively, where what you get when you dissect.
Yeah, well, see, they're not. They are being perfectly scientific. They're just being scientific with their feelings rather than scientific with their test tubes, I guess.
Yeah, they're giving you a user manual from the inside of what it feels like when you get it right. And so it's more useful because it's more like a personal map. It's kind of like a graphic map for the user to navigate, as opposed to like an accurate orthogonal map, which is what we would use in the West. So it's kind of like a pirate's treasure map that's kind of based on the human experience, and as opposed to like a Mercator projection, which is
but I mean, the thing is, though, it's more authentic, isn't it? Because the most authentic thing for you is what you feel, and you're basing the whole exploration on that. Because what I feel is all I know. you know,
Yeah, it's
and it
easier
was,
to navigate off one of these personal maps than it is to navigate off a Mercator projection.
yeah. So I mean, I just feel an attraction to that process because it seems to be more original and more authentic way to
Yeah,
be
and it
looking
goes
at
all the way back to the shamans. I mean, I think that's what the shamans were
it.
doing in the caves, where
Yeah,
they said it in terms of the spirit, but what they're showing is initiates what they will encounter on a spiritual journey. So they're saying,
yeah,
like, you will come to the elk god, and they have the elk god and the thing, and they animate
yeah,
the picture on the wall, a mural with a torch, and they say, the elk god will ask you this, and then you respond that, and they teach them like that. I think that's what they were doing. Then the initiate, when they start on this kind of work, then it suddenly all makes sense to them. And it makes sense in terms of Jungian archetypes and that, and they say in terms of feelings, and then they get, it's not a literal elk god that manifests itself. It's a metaphor. And you go, I get it. That feeling's the elk, this thing's, and so it's kind of what I'm doing with what I'm saying with the layered brain. And so
It's like
the
image of the bull it's like the image of the bull that you used previously.
Yeah, exactly. So at some stage you see the like panel 4 seeing the bull. Well, then you go, it's a metaphor for the alien cortex. Now I get it. You experience the alien cortex, you understand the thinking part, you clearly can visualize it, you can see it and working in front of you. But I could have said, on the journey we'll find this fierce dragon, and the dragon has these attributes and stuff. And all I'm doing is describing the say reptilian brain. Then at some stage you'd go like, that's what you said. I get it. The dragon's a metaphor for my reptilian part in me. I got it. See, they're doing that with alchemy as well. Alchemy, it was all a metaphor that they translate into chemistry. Like scientists don't realize that now. They think it was proto-chemistry. There's nothing to do with that. It was spiritual development. So what they did was they would get, say, quicksilver, mercury, and then some other elementary compound, and they would put them together, and they'd say that was a metaphor for what happened when you basically did this kind of spiritual practice. And then so then you would suddenly identify, and you would get they would give you a key so that you would know, just like I've given you the key, that like when I say big dragon and I tell you all about the big dragon, I'm talking about your reptilian brain. So they would give you those keys, and then the penny would finally drop while you're sitting there doing these alchemical experiences and probably getting a bit high on the fumes. Then suddenly it would all make sense to you. And the reason why they did it was they felt that the archetypes were not particular to your head. They felt that they were universal, and you could even find them in elementary substances. So they thought, mixing your heart and head and your say your primate brain and your mammalian brain, mixing them together would turn you into this kind of person. And then they could do it with saying, well, this is Mercury represents this, and Mars represents this hematite, and then you put them together and they make this amalgam, and then say, well, that's analogous to what happens when you do this kind of Jungian thing. So Jung recovered all of that and made this kind of alchemy. And didn't go down well because we're too literal minded now. But that was how the problem is that we're too screwed up in academia today, because we take what should be metaphor as literal, and we take what was meant literally as metaphor. So we kind of can't understand it at all. But with a bit of experience, Jung went far enough to recover what they were talking in psychological terms. Then he raided it and became famous for all these new concepts and so on. It's like, he's just a fucking plagiarist.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thanks. Yeah.
Oh, well, anyway, that was long.
That was long, yeah.
That's the longest meeting ever.
And now observe as I trick us back into another 15 minutes. Just kidding.
Okay.
Don't ask anymore.
I'm hungry.
Yeah, it's time for dinner. Well, no, what you mean is, Sophie, what you mean is, my reptilian brain
Wants a
And my-
burger.
wants
My
to be
fish
fed.
brain can smell something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's very enlightened conversation.
And my primate brain wants to trick us into another 30 minutes.
Yeah, just to be mischievous and stuff like that.
Yes, I know what you mean.
And my alien cortex says, "Fuck! Look at the time."
Nobody's talking about the mammalian brain here.
I don't
I
have
feel
one.
sorry for all of you.
Oh,
That's the mammalian brain.
Yeah. Excellent. Brilliant.
I think that was primate brain. I think that was
Oh, was that primate brain?
Large sarcasm.
The mammalian brain is maybe like, let's all have a vote.
Take pity on all of us and let us go.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you very
guys.
much. Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks, everyone. This will be a
Okay,
good recording.
thanks.
Have a good day.
Bye then.
Have a nice
Okay.
day.